Hello, this is Little Green Ghouls, and welcome back to Goosebumps Revisited, a series where we break down a classic Goosebumps book, while also totaling up some of our Goosebumps cliches and classic moments. This week, I'm excited to visit I Live in Your Basement. This book had been hyped up in my comments for a while now, and it was one I had no memory of whatsoever. Lucky for me, it lived up to the hype, and was a pretty great time, albeit a little confusing at times and borderline convoluted. If you never read this one, you're missing out on one of Stein's weirder stories. The 1997 cover has always made me think of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. There's just something about this purple border and the blob of peanut butter looking slime monster. I think this cover is a great representation of the story inside, because you actually will get a glob monster in this book, although the cover is toned down from the pile of various human organs described in the story. We have no book tearouts or other covers to look at this week, just another vague promo for Goosebumps Series 2000 and Cry of the Cat towards the end of the book. I like that they kept this a mystery to build up suspense for an upcoming project. In the back of the book, we also have the same ad for Goosebumps on the web that we've had before, as well as this promo for Welcome to Deadhouse on VHS tape. There's also a promo for Attack of the Mutant, the computer game, which I've featured in a Goosebumps flashback before. Our front tag says, "Talk about a monster nightmare," which is a nice hint in all the dream twists this book contains. Our back tag says, "He's got the basement blues." And I don't know what this is referring to, so maybe somebody in the comments will. But let's read this blurb in the back. "Don't do this. Watch out for that. Marco's mom thinks the whole world is a danger zone. She won't even let Marco play softball, but Marco just wants to have fun. So he sneaks off to a game, and that's when it happens. He gets hit in the head with a baseball bat. Now things are getting really fuzzy, really scary. Because when Marco gets home, he gets the strangest call from someone who says they live in Marco's basement." Okay, let's start this summary. The book opens with our introduction to Marco, and we learn his mom is just a little anxious. She's convinced everything is out to get Marco. He can't fill the bathtub up all the way or he'll drown. He can't climb a tree or he'll break his neck. He can't eat fast or he'll choke. And he can't even sharpen pencils without being warned he'll poke his eyes out. Marco's days consist of neurotic reminders from his mom to sit up straight or his spine will curve, don't make funny faces or the muscles will freeze, don't pick his nose or his finger will get stuck up there, don't touch the dog, it has germs, or apparently put his hands in his pockets because they also have germs. All of this naturally results in Marco having to sneak around to do anything fun. He's really into softball and has to do it in secret because his mom thinks he'll break every bone in his body if he does. I'm really hoping the theme of this book is mommy issues because that's new territory for Goosebumps. Marco is out of school early because of a Goosebumps teacher meeting, so he races home to drop off his stuff and play softball before his mom returns home. While at the house, we're introduced to his dog Tyler, who's a proper Goosebumps Cocker Spaniel. It's the end of the series, so we better be getting some throwbacks to the first few books. Once at the baseball field, we meet Marco's best friend Jeremy, who's basically perfect. We also learn in passing that Marco's mom is very active in the school PTA, which makes complete sense given her overbearing nature. There's also like 5 other kids here, but I'm not going to go into detail on them until I'm sure they're actually going to have a role in this book. While at the softball game, Marco approaches a massive girl named Gwynnie with a bat from behind, and manages to get himself a bat swing full speed to the cranium and is knocked unconscious in a chapter cliffhanger. Marco comes to on his living room couch with his mom inches from his face. He's still dizzy and has bandages wrapped around his head. His mom jumps right into the "I told you so's" and declares he cracked his head open like an eggshell. This has to be an exaggeration though, because I doubt Marco would be chilling on the couch versus a hospital if his skull is actually cracked. Marco doesn't have this reasoning though, and starts freaking out and wants to know if his head really was cracked wide open. Too bad for Marco though, because his mom just wanders off into the kitchen, leaving Marco to dwell in his own misery. His head is throbbing and he can barely move without pain shooting down his neck. The phone next to him starts ringing and he ignores it in hopes that his mom will answer it, because he's really not in the mood for chit-chat. Eventually he gives in and answers the phone, only to be met with a mysterious voice asking if he's okay, because he needs to be okay, because Marco is supposed to take care of this mystery voice. Marco is very confused and learns this unknown voice belongs to a boy named Keith, who reports that he lives in Marco's basement in a chapter cliffhanger. Marco then can't tell if he hung up or if this basement dweller Keith hung up, and it's all intentionally confusing because it's hard to discern what's really happening so far in this story. His mom returns, but she's changed her hair and clothes, which is also kind of odd and adds to the surreal feeling. He tells her about the creepy phone call from Keith, and Marco's mom looks concerned because the only person who called was Jeremy, checking to see how Marco is doing. And more importantly, there's no phone in this room, so she doesn't know who the hell he thinks he talked to. We then jump to the next morning, and Marco hops out of bed feeling much better. He checks himself out in the mirror and admires the massive purple bruise on his temple, but aside from that, he appears to be healthy. He then races downstairs for some Frosted Flakes and Corn Pops mixed together. I'm considering these Frosted Flakes a Goosebumps throwback because for a while, all of our protagonists started their days with Frosted Flakes. His mom is back to her usual self and warns Marco not to eat too fast or he'll clog his stomach pipes, and doesn't want him leaving the house in case he faints and slams his head onto the sidewalk. Marco's mom is stressful. Marco is then startled by 2 loud thuds, and his mom looks at him with concern when she has to explain it was just somebody knocking at the door. This ends up being Jeremy, who wants to see how his concussed friend is doing. The 2 boys awkwardly chat about the incident for a bit, while Marco's mom keeps giving helpful advice like, don't walk too fast or you'll faint. Eventually she leaves the 2 boys and they promise just to sit and talk. This leads to wanting to play pool in the basement, but Marco is hesitant because he suddenly remembers his weird dreamish phone call with Keith from the basement. Once in the basement, Marco turns on every light and searches it thoroughly, but finds no signs of Keith and officially chalks it all up to concussion hallucination. We then get 3 pages of detailed pool action before Marco hears weird scratching sounds, followed by some bumps. The 2 boys locate the sound in the cabinet under the stairs. Marco starts rambling on about how somebody must be living underneath there, and Jeremy dismisses that as nonsense. Marco then summons the courage to open the cabinet and is attacked by a mystery creature in a chapter cliffhanger. Except, this creature isn't Keith, it's a big fat gray squirrel. The squirrel races around the basement for 2 pages before finally leaping out of an open basement window. All this ruckus has attracted the mom's attention though, and she warns the boys to be careful of the pool cues or they'll poke their eyes out. The advice doesn't stop there though, because at lunch, with a classic meal of sandwiches and chicken noodle soup, she warns the boys to blow on it or they'll burn the skin off their tongues. This mom is too much, she's too real. Jeremy heads home and Marco takes a long nap. Too long of a nap in fact, because now he's wide awake at midnight. He decides to get a little midnight snack and comes across an open basement door. This concerns him because he knows they keep it closed. As he's shutting it, he hears scraping sounds in the basement and shouts to find out who's down there. He's extra concerned though when he gets a reply that it's Keith. Don't you remember he lives down there? The basement light then flashes on and he spots his mom. She reports she couldn't sleep and was doing laundry because it relaxes her. This mom is suspicious as hell. Who does laundry in a pitch black basement? Weird ass woman. Marco warns her to get out of there because she's not alone. He goes on to explain Keith, and his mom just insists he needs a rest from his head injury. While she's lecturing, Keith's voice suddenly calls out from the darkness, Marco, listen to your mother. Marco is now exasperated and is like, don't you hear that? And his mom just keeps telling him he needs rest. Tyler, the trusty Cocker Spaniel, decides to get on this midnight action and nearly knocks Marco down the basement stairs. This all settles down and we skip Sunday and jump to Monday at school without any resolution about this basement drama. Marco's teacher, Miss Mosley, drags Marco to the front of the class to tell his tale of head wound survival and wants him to share what happened at the hospital. This leaves Marco extra confused because he has zero memory of being at the hospital and only remembers waking up on his mom's couch. He spends the rest of the day wondering what else he can't remember, and then we get this bizarre chapter cliffhanger with Gwenny, the beastly girl who hit Marco originally. She comes running up to him menacingly with a baseball bat raised above her head like she's getting ready to bludgeon him to death. There's no resolution to this scene either. Marco just hauls ass away from this girl blindly across the street and full speed home. At the house, his mom immediately chastises him for sweating and warns him he'll catch a cold. He wants to ask his mom about the hospital, but decides it will just cause more drama from this weirdo woman and heads up to his room. When he opens the door, he's startled to find a strange pale boy with wavy black hair sitting on his bed, who introduces himself as Keith, the boy from the basement. Marco acts quickly and locks Keith in the room so his mom can finally see the basement boy. He races downstairs to retrieve his mom, but when he returns, the only thing on Marco's bed is Tyler the dog, who's happily wagging his tail and wanting to know what all the excitement is about. Marco's mom wastes no time and calls up Dr. Bailey because she thinks Marco's brains have been scrambled. We jump to the doctor's office, where his mom continues to spread her wisdom to uninterested patients. One poor girl has had the hiccups for 10 days, and Marco's mom tells her it's probably from eating too many eggs because the eggs can cause hiccups, since the white parts are too slippery to digest. Marco's mom is a straight up nutcase. When Marco finally sees Dr. Bailey, he decides to tell the doctor everything, and is not pleased when the doctor's response is that they need to remove Marco's brain and examine it under a microscope. At first, it seems like just a deadpan joke, but Marco's mom is like, no, listen to the doctor. If he wants to take out your brain and look at it, you're gonna do it. Marco is just as bewildered by this as I am, and is able to convince the doctor and his mom to wait a few days before scheduling his debraining. We're halfway through this book, and I'm excited to see where it goes. The whole tone of this story feels like one big weird dream where everything is just a bit off. We jump to a couple days later, and Marco is busy having a great time with his homework assignment on the computer, where you have to write from somebody else's point of view, so of course he chose Tyler the dog. He gets a phone call, which gives him a brief flashback to his phone call with Keith, before answering it and having a pleasant conversation with Jeremy. Once off the phone, his good mood is ruined when he sees all of his work has been deleted. He notices the face of Keith floating on the screen. He is then abruptly choked from behind in a chapter cliffhanger. This isn't Keith though, it's Gwynnie, who just let herself in, I guess. She came to apologize for smashing his head in, but couldn't pass up the opportunity for a good scare. She also explains that she wasn't chasing him with a bat earlier, she was just trying to talk to him and happened to be holding a bat, like Homer and his chainsaw.
Come on, do you want to see my new chainsaw and hockey mask?
Marco tries to show Gwynnie Keith on the computer screen, but it turns out the computer hasn't even been on this whole time. Marco tries and fails to explain the whole Keith situation to Gwynnie, and she just thinks he's messing with her. Eventually he convinces her to check out the basement though, just to make sure Keith isn't hiding down there. Gwynnie is described as being massive and strong, so Marco is thrilled to have some protection this time. They spend a couple chapters creeping around the basement looking behind boxes and scaring themselves over nothing. This all comes to an end though when Gwynnie announces she's getting out of there and she thinks Marco has just been trying to scare her, but declares he can't scare her. And that's when this book takes a wild turn. Her eyes caught the light from the stairwell. A strange smile spread over her face. "You can't scare me," she repeated. "I'll show you why." "Excuse me? I didn't understand. If you'd only listen to me." "I'll show you something," Gwynnie said. She placed both hands on the wooden banister. Then she opened her mouth, wide, wider. Her mouth stretched open, wider, wider, until the rest of her face disappeared behind her open mouth. Her tongue plopped heavily over her chin, and then something pink began to pour out. Something pink and glistening wet rolled from her gaping mouth. More, swelling as it poured out. At first, I thought she had a big glob of bubblegum in there, but as the pink gunk flowed up from her throat, the mouth pulled open even further, and her head disappeared behind it. And I realized I wasn't staring at bubblegum. I was staring at Gwynnie's insides. I saw yellow organs clinging to the glistening pink flesh. Something long and gray twisted out of her mouth, wrapped around itself. Dark purple lungs slid over the drooping tongue. And then her red heart, so red, so startling red, plopped from her open mouth, throbbing steadily, throbbing wetly. I uttered a long moan of horror, but I couldn't turn away, couldn't take my eyes off of Gwynnie as her insides poured from her mouth. I stood there staring in amazement and cold horror at the pulsing, quivering organs clinging to the oozing pink flesh. Stood there, watching Gwynnie until she had turned completely inside out. And then I opened my mouth in an endless scream. Marco's screams result in him jolting awake, except he's not in his house. Nope. He's in the hospital with his mom, who informs him he's taken a hit to the head. So these last 60 pages were potentially only a dream. I'm not sure how I feel about that yet. Gwynnie appears in the doorway, causing Marco to have a panic attack, but it gets weird. It turns out Gwynnie is actually Marco's little sister, and she wasn't the one that hit Marco in the head with a bat. His friend Jeremy did. So all these prior events have been a little mixed up. Gwynnie is a classic obnoxious younger Goosebumps sibling, and won't stop pestering Marco, even though the boy has a fresh head wound. After some pages of sibling banter, the mom and Gwynnie leave Marco to get some rest as he drifts off to sleep. When he wakes up, he meets the real Dr. Bailey, who looks like an attractive TV doctor, according to Marco. This encounter seems normal at first, until Dr. Bailey asks to examine Marco's mouth. He says, "Ah," and then Dr. Bailey roughly snatches Marco's tongue and begins yanking it out. He frantically is pulling yards and yards of tongue, hand over hand, resulting in ropes of tongue just curling up on the floor. You may be shocked to learn this was yet another dream fake-out. Marco wakes up again and is still in the hospital. He's all alone, but thinks he's in the real world now. This is short-lived though, because yet another Dr. Bailey appears to examine him. This Dr. Bailey is described as being 7 feet tall with giant bushy eyebrows, so we don't know if this man is actually just really tall or another dream. He examines Marco and says he should be ready to go home by tomorrow, but before leaving he gives him an envelope. Marco opens it and finds a note from our mystery friend Keith that reads, "Dear Marco, please hurry home. It's time for you to start taking care of me. I'm waiting for you in the basement. Keith." He sets down the letter in horror and is interrupted by his mom and sister. They brought him a Milky Way bar and want to know what Dr. Bailey had to say. Marco doesn't care about any of that and wants to show them Keith's letter, but when he goes to grab it, it's nowhere to be found. Dr. Bailey pokes his head in the room to update Marco's mom, and has no recollection of ever giving Marco a letter. Things just keep staying confusing as fuck for poor Marco and the reader. It jumps to that night, and Marco is trying his best not to fall asleep because he's sick of these trippy-ass dreams. This fails though, and he eventually falls asleep without any reported dreams. He wakes up the next morning to his mom packing up his hospital room so he can go home. She thinks he'll be able to go to school, and Gwynnie lets him know that he missed out on a bagpipe performance at school yesterday. At home, Marco kisses the front door because he feels like he's been gone for weeks. His mom then makes him his favorite pizza, cheese with sliced up hot dogs on it, which sounds fucking disgusting. I think hot dogs are straight up repulsive though. Jeremy stops by to apologize for whacking Marco unconscious. They then spend the afternoon watching some rented VHS tapes, like Indiana Jones. There's always lots of talk about ghostwriters and Goosebumps, and questions around how much does Stein outline versus write, but I feel like this one has his fingerprints all over it with the Frosted Flakes, Cocker Spaniels, and Indiana Jones. After the Indiana Jones marathon, Marco is feeling tired and a little shaky, so he decides to take a nap. He heads up to his room, and as he's drifting off to sleep, he spots a boy in the doorway. At first he thinks it's Jeremy, but nope, it's Keith in a chapter cliffhanger. Keith has an evil smile on his face as he keeps repeating how he lives in the basement and how Marco will have to take care of him forever. Marco tries to escape the room, but Keith keeps cornering him. This results in Marco grabbing a paperweight and smashing it into the side of Keith's head, dropping him to the ground. Marco tries to revive Keith in a panic because he didn't mean to kill the kid, but things get weird again, and I stare down at him in shock and horror. His features, his eyes, his nose, his mouth, melted into the flesh of his face. Then his head slid into his neck. Like a turtle pulling into its shell, Keith's head disappeared into his shoulders. His arms and legs slid into the trunk of his body. His clothes fell away. The skin on his body glimmered and turned milky, like the skin of a snail or a slug. As I gasped in shock, the body began to wriggle across the carpet. It flopped wetly, heavily towards me. I gasped as I saw a thick trail of yellow slime it left on the carpet behind it. And then, before I could force my trembling legs to move, the spongy wet creature rose up, stretched, and wrapped itself around my waist. I let out a sick groan of disgust. Its sour aroma shot up to my nostrils, choking me. Its sticky wet flesh tightened around me. I opened my mouth to scream for help, but it choked out my air. The odor, so foul and heavy, wave after wave of it washed over me like some kind of poison gas. I tried to kick the creature, but my sneakers stank into its soft, gooey slime. I punched with both fists and tried butting it with my head. My punches made sweat squish sounds as my hands disappeared into the spongy body. It was like battling a slimy, sticky sponge. I tried wrestling it, bending it back, but the foul-smelling goo stretched over me, over my face. So warm and sticky, pulsing. It wrapped around my head, covered my face, covered my nose. The warm, sticky slime slid up into my nostrils. I can't breathe, I realized. I'm gonna suffocate inside this thing. Marco ends up moving inside the Keith sludge monster and forcing it to tumble down the stairs in search of help. Marco's head escapes the goo briefly, so he's able to get some air before being smothered again. Marco then forces the slime ball he's trapped in to roll into the kitchen, where he bounces it around the room frantically in search of help. At one point he slams it hard enough that the slime creature breaks into two, resulting in two Keith monsters. Marco is smothered for a third time, and just before he's about to black out, his mom appears. She calmly tells him to get up and stop rolling around on the kitchen floor. Marco opens his eyes and there's no slime Keith to be found anywhere. He thinks he must be dreaming and slams his head into a cabinet, but everything remains the same. Marco is overwhelmed by all of this and races back to his room to calm down and process what the fuck is going on. But once again, he's greeted by Keith just chilling on his bed. Marco gives in at this point and is like, whatever, I'll do what you want, I'll be your slave. Add the use of slave to the list of evidence that Stein wrote this one himself. As Keith is heading off to the basement to create a list of chores for Marco to perform, he smiles and unleashes some more disturbing imagery. Before I go, there's just one thing I want to show you, he said. He took a few steps back into the room, then opened his mouth wide. Shiny pink stuff poured out of his mouth. For a second, I thought he was blowing a bubblegum bubble, but then I quickly realized what was happening. His glistening wet insides poured out of his mouth. Yellow organs clung to the pink flesh. His purple heart plopped out from between his teeth, pulsing inside a thick web of blue rope-like veins. I stared in horror, watching him turn inside out. Then I started to scream, and Keith opened his mouth, teeth on the outside, and he screamed too. We're in for a doozy of a twist though, so let me try to explain the situation. The next chapter opens from Keith's point of view. He's just had a terrible nightmare that Marco was hit in the head with a bat, and when he went upstairs to see him, Marco attacked him and knocked him down the stairs. Keith's mom is like, no, you were hit in the head with a bat when you snuck out of the basement to play with the humans, even though I warned you 1,000 times to stay away from humans because they're dangerous to monsters. Even monster moms are nags in this book. Apparently, Keith and his mom are shape-shifting monsters that live in Marco and Gwynny's basement. They can appear human, but their monster form is turning their guts all inside out. Keith reverts to monster form to sleep off his head wound when he's startled by Marco standing at the top of the stairs and thinks he's been spotted. Marco demands to know who's in his basement, and Keith just replies, "Go upstairs, you're dreaming." And that's how this one ends, with Keith wondering if Marco will believe this was all just a dream. This was the wrong damn book to read hungover. I spent way too much time rereading things to make sure I was understanding it correctly. We don't have an episode to look at this week because there aren't any more until Series 2000, so we'll just jump into my final thoughts and totals. Overall, I thought I Live in Your Basement was kind of a confusing hot mess, but an entertaining hot mess. It was fun genuinely having no idea where this book was going and not knowing what was real versus what was just a dream. I enjoyed the surreal tone of the book that never really let up. Usually when something super weird happens, Stein will quickly be like, just kidding. But scenes like the debraining suggestion at the doctor's office were played straight, and I was left to wonder what kind of world this kid is living in. The final twist with the book actually being from Keith's point of view was a little hard to process, and it felt like the ending was kind of lackluster, but it really did fit with the tone of the whole book and the theme of not knowing reality versus what was a dream. I'm going to give this one 4 out of 5 concussions. I forgot to mention too how much I enjoyed that nasty inside out guts imagery. Okay, on to our totals. I Live in Your Basement didn't have any vomit, shoulder scares, or any asshole victims, but it did have some 90s moments. In Getting Jiggy with the 90s, we had 3 90s moments. These included baked jeans, corn pops, and renting VHS tapes. This raises our series total to 181 jiggy 90s moments. There was just one prank, and it's a prank bro. This was when Gwynnie appears from behind to choke out Marco as an apology. Although, should any of these even count considering all of this was just a dream? This raises our Goosebumps series total to 135 pranks. I Live in Your Basement brings back It Was Only a Dream for a grand finale of 3 massive dream fakeouts. The first being nearly 60 pages of dream with Marco in the hospital, followed by a weird tongue dream, finished by all of this just being Keith's dream actually, so maybe that undoes the first 2, I don't know. This raises our series total to 18 dreams. I Live in Your Basement had a total of 14 chapter cliffhangers that ran the gambit of solid to bizarre to disappointing. This raises our Goosebumps series total to 759. The Clunky Award this week has to go to chapter 6 to 7, where the creature in the basement cabinet ends up just being a squirrel. Considering how weird the rest of this book got, a squirrel feels like a cop-out. Shocker ending. Our big twist to this book was all of this was actually inside Monster Keith's nightmare, not Marco's. It's not exactly a final page twist, but it is the last 3 pages. This raises our Goosebumps series total to 52. Well, that's it for I Live in Your Basement. I'm glad I got to go into this one blind because it was a bit of a ride. Next week is our grand finale with Monster Blood 4. I still can't believe this series is going to go out on fucking Evan Ross of all things, but that's how it went down. Let me know in the comments what you thought of I Live in Your Basement. Were you as confused as I was at points? Was all of this just another dream? Do you think Stein was inspired by the inside out fog from The Simpsons? Also, what did you think of my phone call and mommy issue horror clips this week? It was a bit of a stretch, but I felt like she was a solid horror element for the first half of this book. Anyways, as always, thanks again for watching, and make sure you subscribe for
the pride, the love,